Alrighty, guys. So I figured I would go over the new spawn. We got Hermes and Melydia, and I thought I'd give my opinion on it, tell you how much they cost, and the whole shebang. And then, is it worth it to even spawn them? So let's start with Hermes. And so the first one does damage that penetrates, but the ability power isn't really high enough. So don't expect to kill a whole lot with this. It is wind, which is more difficult to stack fire defense, so that's good. But the ability power is pretty low. It is 5 hits though, so you can probably kill some weaker people, but don't expect to be killing an entire team with this monster. The excuse me. The fortify, the next couple things that it does is fortify, which I actually really like. They increased the time of this one too. I think this is the first 150. Usually they're 120. But fortifies are pretty strong, just in general. Unfortunately, they are really weak to time slices. But this monster kind of gets around that, and I'll explain that in a little bit as well. All allies 10 CP every 5 seconds. That is incredibly good for things like Colosseum. It can be good for guild battle, but it kind of depends. Iron Wall. Iron Wall is an old buff, looks like this, and it basically just gives you these things. So it removes your statuses, your negative effects, gives you a 50% damage taken. That's this little effect right there. That's that part. And then to both physical and magical, applies a counter healing, which is basically nothing. Casts concentration, which just increases your chance of defense proccing, which is actually really good considering that this monster applies mastery, which increases your chances of defense proccing. And it also casts resurrection, which is fantastic as well. Because usually once people are starting to uni, most people have lost resurrection at that point. So anyone who's living, that can be pretty helpful. Now there are a lot of monsters that strip resurrection, but for the most part, this monster is pretty defense heavy so far. Applies overcast. So it's really interesting. I looked everywhere. I looked at my Mahala. I looked at some other monsters like this that that have overcast. I remember overcast giving like a base 50% damage reduction just to all incoming damage, and it couldn't be ignored. I'm not sure where that went, but it appears to be gone. So that's nice. A team every once in a while does change buffs. So I guess they changed it and I never knew. Or I never noticed. But I guess it increases elemental defense by 60, which is pretty bad. But I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess. Applies a bubble to you and applies a field, one of the newer ones. I actually like this field for this monster because it's a status ailment resistance field. He also awakens into 40k, which is garbage. We've already kind of talked about, I've talked about it many times, but the new orc monsters are 60k. So basically you're multiplying this by 2, right? For 2 different stats. So you're getting a total of 80. Whereas if you had the orc monsters, those you'd multiply, excuse me, by 2, and they'd be 60k. And so you're missing out on about 40k worth of stats. Now for one monster, that's not a big deal. Multiply that against 5 monsters though, and that is a lot of stats. I mean, we're talking about 200k at that point in stats. So I hate this. It's really bad for 45 cost, but it is what it is. I guess we can't get over it. Serenity, also kind of a weird buff, but I do like it. It allows you, if the enemy has time sliced a bunch and you somehow manage to survive the uni, it gives you the opportunity to immediately uni again, as long as the time slicing that has applied to you has not removed serenity before you have fully gone back to 0 uni. So when you uni, you're at 100% uni, and you can't gain any uni during the uni animations. However, when the uni is done, it drops back down to 0. So there's a chance that if they had time sliced you twice for example, like a 30 a 30-second time slice and a 40-second time slice, something like that, and this was about to expire, and or your teammates, it can give it to your teammates too. But it's an interesting concept, especially since this monster is very defensive. It's not going to be saving you though. Serenity itself is a pretty weak buff, so don't expect to get a whole lot of defense out of it. But I do like Serenity more than Dawn on this monster though, so that's good. Frozen resistance, not a big fan of frozen resistance. I personally think that Frozen is really powerful, but it's not used enough, I think. Wind and time defense, that's really good. People always need more time defense. Wind defense is pretty good. Most of the time, water monsters slap pretty hard. And we have I believe this is the second monster to have a 50% cost reduction. The other one is a 50% uni reduction. So that's nice. This is extremely valuable for anyone who doesn't have a 50% cost reduction or a 50% uni reduction. You definitely need one for high level guild battle content. And the reason why is because as a main class, you can reach 100% uni reduction and 100% cost reduction. However, you need one of these monsters. You need either a main slot cost reduction or a main slot uni reduction monster in order to achieve 100% reduction. So this is an excellent monster for a lot of people who haven't gotten it. Now, what's my opinion on this monster overall? It's really interesting. It gives basically every single buff that you would want, except for Miracle. Keep in mind, Miracle is basically like Resurrection, except for it can only be applied once. And honestly, Miracle is way better because Miracle gives you CP back and it gives you 100% HP, whereas Resurrection gives you something like 75 or 60% HP. And gives you no CP back. So Miracle is way better. It's the only thing that this monster is missing. If it had Miracle, that would be a miracle, honestly, because this is just an absolute massive defense unit. Where do I think this monster fits? Well, it's definitely not a must throw in guild battles. So it already kind of loses out on the main aspect. Because you're not going to be using this monster for PvE. For questing, you're basically only going to be using damage monsters. You want to kill the monsters as fast as possible, because the longer you're in the quest, the more likely they are to use multiple percent moves, the more likely they are to lock you down, reduce your cost, uni-lock you, and destroy you. So you don't want to spend time in quests. Now, you could argue for some extremely difficult quests that there is a requirement where you have to be fighting against monsters for a certain amount of time. And that, in those cases, like the really, really hard level quests, you could argue that this monster is actually really valuable. Again, doesn't apply Miracle, which would be extremely good, but this monster does give you a lot of things. I love that it gives you Fortify. Fortify, every time that you take damage, it reduces the amount of seconds that you have. So it reduces it by 10 seconds, but it prevents you from instantly dying. And this monster applies Overcast, which when Overcast gets removed, then it time extends, in this case by 60 seconds. So I love that there's a lot of good combinations here. There's Iron Wall plus Mastery. So right, you get the concentration, which increases the chance of defense proccing, plus you get the triple proc, which is exactly the kind of thing that you would want. and it gives you CP over time. You know, there's so much to this monster that's really good. And honestly, it gives you, like, this is really rare, and it's really good too. Like, why would you not like this monster? I think that this monster is a perfect monster for defense. And you'd basically only be using it in things like Colosseum and things like Guild Battle. So is it actually worth getting this monster and throwing it? That's a much harder question. There have been in the past multiple turtle types of unis where people will intentionally throw really high damage reduction monsters in order to survive the uni, in order to do things like 1 second swap in ninjas and then uni with ninjas. There's a lot of aspects where this monster could be extremely powerful. However, the best way to win a guild battle is to just win the clash and kill your opponents. If none of your opponents are alive, they can't uni. So it's stuck in one of those weird situations where if you lose the clash, then the opponents are going to go first anyway. So why do you need all of this stuff? You're probably, half your team or most of your team is already dead if you lose the clash. So then you have now, you're just trying to keep alive the 1 or 2 members who might still be alive on your team. And that's only if you survive the uni. It's a really bizarre, you know what I mean? Like, it's weird. It should be, if it wanted to be a 10 out of 10, absolutely incredibly good monster, remove this, replace it with priority. It's just weird. So, like, in something like Guild Battle, the only place that I can even think about using this is if you're swapping in and you're somehow trying to survive, but like a Rook, for example, and you're trying to just throw unis that will help you buy time for your other allies to swap in. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really bizarre monster. Doesn't fit anywhere. In Colosseum, it could be good. But again, like I've mentioned before, the best things in Colosseum are killing your opponents with the monster or uni-locking your opponents, because if they're dead, they can't uni and they can't fight back. And if they're uni-locked, then they can't fight back and they basically won't get any buffs. And then you can just kill them. You know what I mean? Like, there's not a place for this monster to thrive. And that's where this monster really falls apart. Yes, it does every single thing that you would want in a defense monster. But the fact is, the defense monsters are bad in this game. It's really unfortunate, but I don't see any place where this monster is amazing. And because of that, I have to rank it a 6 out of 10. The awakening is really bad. The defense is good, but the problem is that 40k is on the low side, and also you would have to main slot this. You can't put this in your back 5 monsters if you're wanting this cost reduction. So, but then the monster doesn't bring anything to the table that you would want to use this on in any situation. It's really unfortunate because I see the vision. Whoever came up with this monster tried to make it as broken as possible. The problem is it's just not, and it's bad. I could be wrong about this, but I would bet every single gem that I have that the other monster is 100 times better in almost every situation. There's like maybe 1 or 2 situations that exist in all of Unison League where this would be a better monster. So let's talk about the other one. So right off the bat, 800 ability power. That's what you want to see, and it's water. So it's really hard to build against water monsters. Generally speaking, wind is a harder element to build because you don't have multiple things that can stack against it. Hits 5 times. Oh my gosh. And pierces. This is a killing monster. You throw this monster, it kills the enemy team, so then you don't have to worry about it. Oh, wait, the enemy team has survived? It uni-locks the enemy team so that any survivors can no longer uni. Wow, it's exactly what I was just talking about. The perfect combination. If the enemies can't fight back because they're dead or uni-locked, then you win, both in Colosseum and in guild battles. So, right off the bat, I'm in love with this monster. Let's see what else it does. So, Unison gauge reduction by 50. They keep increasing this, but honestly, like I've said multiple times, you can get 100% uni reduction, so not a big deal. Don't really care. Absolute. This is a triple proc on attack. Amazing. Plus elevation. Oh my gosh. That's exactly what you'd want, right? You want to be able to have a higher chance of proccing your main slot so that the other two procs can go off and you're more guaranteed triple procs. That's one of the reasons why Wind Valk was so much better than all the other absolute monsters. And the reason is because when you're using Wind Valk, you can feel it. Every single attack is a triple proc when you're when you have elevation and absolute. Whereas when you just have absolute, it's only it feels like only 10 or maybe like 10 to 30% of your attacks are triple procs. So this is amazing. It's exactly what you'd want on a monster. Team unifills by 50. That is so good. It's good in PvE, it's good in PvP, and it's excellent in guild battles. Getting your team uni wins games. It wins quests, it wins everything. There's no situation where uni gauge filling is ever bad. I mean, there is one situation where, but I'm not going to talk about it. There's a debuff that exists that switches uni gain to uni loss, but again, you can reduce that to 0. So it exists technically, but in practice, it basically never happens because it's a really rare old buff or debuff. Emerald Crest. So we've talked about there are 3 crests, if I remember correctly. And Emerald is the best among them because it gives you 100% in every single stats to every single ally. So again, a monster that does exactly what you would want. And it is the first monster, if I remember correctly, it's the first monster ever to give you a bubble and a crest. So, breaking new territory. So I imagine that that'll be standard in the future, but it is significant now. As I've kind of already alluded to, this one gives you 50% reduction to Unison gauge, which is fantastic. Remember, you only need one of them. You only need cost reduction by 50% or Unison reduction by 50% in order to get 100% reduction in both of them. Again, 40k, I hate it, but it is just one monster, so just forget about it. Rage, I'm not a big fan of Rage. I'd much rather have seen something like Dawn. There's just no situation where I'm excited about Rage because it doesn't really do anything. Insanity resistance is amazing. It's good for PvP, good for PvE, good for guild battles. Insanity is extremely annoying and it can lose you matches extremely quickly. So getting 60 resistance is excellent. Water and Star defense. Keep in mind Star is good against light and dark, so you can consider that a total of 1400 defense. And then water again is good against fire. The problem is that nobody throws fire because fire monsters have generally been much worse. There are a few fire monsters that are still really powerful, but they're hardly ever used. I don't ever see them. So the water part is like meh, and there are a lot of monsters that give exactly this. They give a ton, they give water and star defense, so it's really easy to stack this. I personally am not a big fan of this defense. However, with that being said, it's still good. It's much better than just being water. So the fact that it's 2 elements, I'm happy. Overall, this monster is a really, really good monster. I would say it's probably It's probably a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. And it kind of, for water monsters, it's a 10 out of 10. If you don't know, there's not a lot of good water buffing monsters. So in that aspect, I like it. In the only part of the game that I'm like, is in PvE, in questing in particular. It's not, you can't use this monster everywhere. I mean, you could. The triple proc, the triple attack is really good, and having a crest is really good. Both of those are but it doesn't do anything else besides that. In PvP and in guild battles, this is 100% a 10 out of 10 monster and is required by most people. I would say for the average player, this monster is a monster that you'll be able to keep for probably a year or two, just because it can kill people, but also because you need unison reduction or cost reduction, in most cases, a main slotted monster, in order to be really effective in high level guild battles. And it's really nice in PvE and PvP, but also this monster gives a bunch of good things, right? You can use this monster in a lot of different ways. It gives you insanity resistance, it gives you a good crest, and it gives you good triple proc. It's kind of a rare buff, but you can use it in things like questing. Which, by the way, questing is the only place that this monster is not nearly as strong as maybe I would like, but I would still say it's a pretty solid monster. Now, the question is it worth spawning? So you get 100 to 400, which is interesting, but you require 1,200 for either, 12,000 for either of these on stat monsters. Which, why would you be spawning if you're not trying to get the on stat monster? That's my main thing. Never ever do one of these 50%. You'll never get it. Never do a 30%. Again, you'll never get it. I am not a big fan of the 10,000 ones. The reason is because if you're going to use these monsters, either of them, you'd be wanting to put them in your main slot, and you'd want to be holding on to them for many years. Keep in mind, just because of their 50% buff. Now, keep in mind that it's only 40k in total stats, which means that if you're not on stat, you're losing a lot of stats. So it's pretty much always a good thing to go for these guys. Now, it is only 5 boxes, which is nice. And unfortunately, though, these are low numbers. 500 to 800 is pretty low. 200 to 400 is really low. And then there's no other way to gain medals. Now, there are 3 different boxes that are, you can get the monster from this box. You can get the monster from this box. You can get the monster from the top box. I don't think you can get you can get the monsters from every single box. Yes, you can get the new monsters from every single box. Don't expect to get that, but it is worth mentioning because it is unusual. Usually that's not the case. Now, what are we looking at total? Take the average as just that, an average. I would say most people will be spending close to 900 gems on something like this. I wouldn't be spawning it if I had less than 900 gems. 900, in my opinion, is a bare minimum. Now, will I be spawning this? Perhaps. However, it is worth mentioning that this is going to be out for the rest of the anniversary. So we still have 8 days here and 8 days here. They may be dropping another monster. So it is worth waiting, in my opinion. I do think Melydia is a good monster, but it depends on what you are specializing in. I'd say she's probably a 9 out of 10. Again, Hermes, overall, Melydia is a 9 out of 10. Again, Hermes is like a 6 out of 10 for me. Maybe even a 5 out of 10, to be honest. The only thing that Hermes has that I'm really in love with is this. The passive, the main slot passive. So yeah, that's that's my opinion on this. I'm excited to see if there are going to be any more monsters. But yeah, I'll catch you guys later.